prices of new and used cars have skyrocketed.
Yeah, we've seen that. But as KSL consumer investigator Matt Gephardt explains it, that doesn't mean it's impossible to find a car you love.
Every car you see on that lot isn't an asset. It's a debt bomb ticking down to zero. Floor plan loans, frozen inventory, and collapsing trust, dealerships are being crushed under their own cars. A rule meant to protect you just flipped the entire industry upside down. So how long before the countdown hits zero? Why are cars turning into liabilities? And what happens when the banks pull the plug? Stick around, because by the end, you'll hear the clock ticking too. The law as detonation. This was not reform. It was a controlled demolition. That is how dealership owners described the Federal Trade Commission's new rule when it landed in the summer of 2024. Known officially as the Combating Auto Retail Scams Rule, or the CARS rule, it promised to reshape the entire way Americans buy vehicles. For decades, car showrooms thrived on a delicate game of confusion. The advertised sticker was rarely the true cost. Add-ons for nitrogen in tires, mysterious security etching, or inflated documentation fees appeared late in the process, quietly inflating margins. The CARS rule cut through that fog. The regulation required one offering price. That meant the number you saw in an ad had to be the real, drive-off-the-lot cost, with all mandatory fees included. It banned so-called junk fees for services that added no value. It also demanded that every additional product, from paint protection to gap insurance, receive the buyer's clear and documented consent. On paper, this looked like a victory for consumers. In practice, it carved deep into the hidden revenue streams that had kept many dealerships solvent. Owners warned that gross profits from new car sales were already razor-thin. If they lost the cushion of markups and extras, some claimed the business model itself would collapse. The CARS rule was more than a policy. It was a spotlight pointed into every corner of the showroom. The courtroom battles that followed would prove even more destabilizing than the rule itself. Court reversal and state blitz. The federal guardrail vanished. The state troopers took over. That is the simplest way to describe what happened next. Within months of the rule's announcement, a coalition of dealer groups challenged it in court. They argued that the Federal Trade Commission had overstepped and that compliance costs would crush small businesses. In late 2024, a federal court vacated the rule, citing procedural flaws. Dealers exhaled with relief, believing the immediate threat was gone. Yet the sigh did not last. State attorneys general had been watching closely. In Rhode Island, a group of dealers agreed to pay more than $1 million to settle accusations of hidden fees. In Arizona, the attorney general secured over $2.5 million in restitution from another chain. Illinois went further, extracting a proposed $20 million settlement from a large network accused of widespread junk fee practices. These were not isolated stings. They signaled a new enforcement era. Dealers suddenly faced a patchwork battlefield. Federal rules, even strict ones, at least promised uniformity. State-level crackdowns meant every border brought different expectations, paperwork, and risks. Politically ambitious prosecutors saw a chance to make headlines by targeting local dealers, and no one felt safe. Legal skirmishes set the stage. Hit that like button right now. Drop a comment with your take. I'm reading every single one. Frozen lots. 400 days. Not a typo. An indictment. That is how long some vehicles have sat unsold on American dealership lots. Step onto certain properties today and the scene feels surreal. Gleaming hoods catch the sun, windshields glitter, but week after week nothing moves. A sedan delivered in early spring might now be layered with autumn leaves. A truck that smelled of factory-fresh plastic in winter still sits untouched as summer heat warps its tires. This paralysis is not universal. Some brands, especially those known for reliability and value, still see a steady rhythm of arrivals and departures. But for many others, especially struggling luxury lines, cars remain like statues, silently accumulating interest charges. The pandemic distorted supply, but what now freezes demand is distrust. Consumers remember the markup years, when dealers charged $10,000, $15,000, even $20,000 over manufacturer-suggested retail prices. They now hesitate, unwilling to reward the same showrooms with full-price loyalty. So the inventory builds. National data shows supply well above healthy norms, with some models sitting more than a year before sale. Each unmoved car is both a visible symbol of eroding trust and a financial time bomb. Behind those motionless rows of vehicles, the real weight pressed down in the finance office. The debt clock. Every car on that lot is a loan payment breathing down their necks. That is the brutal math of floor plan financing, the system almost every dealer relies on. Few dealerships buy their inventory with cash. Instead, they borrow from banks or specialty lenders to stock the lot. Each vehicle is tied to a line of credit, and interest accrues the moment it arrives. When cars sell quickly, the system works. The loan is repaid before interest eats much into profits. But when vehicles sit, the meter keeps running. Consider what 400 days of inventory really means. It means paying interest for well over a year on an asset that loses value with every passing month. It means cash flow squeezed so tightly that payroll, advertising, and basic maintenance are delayed. Managers juggle bills, lenders grow nervous, and the stress ripples through every department. Some dealers try to offset the burden with service revenue, others by cutting staff. But the underlying truth remains. Unsold cars are not just wasted space. They are debts compounding silently, crushing margins with each turn of the calendar. For many dealerships, the debt clock is louder than the sales pitch, and when every car becomes a liability rather than an asset, collapse is not a possibility. It is a countdown. With the clock ticking louder each day, the crisis was about to spill from numbers on a ledger into the wider marketplace. The markup hangover? Remember the markup years? Consumers do. From 2019 through 2022, the average price of a new car in America jumped by more than 30%. Yes, part of the surge was due to pandemic shortages of semiconductors and shipping bottlenecks. But the bigger story was what happened on the showroom floor. Dealers took advantage of demand far outstripping supply. Cars that once sold at or below the manufacturer's suggested retail price were suddenly commanding premiums of $10,000, $15,000, even $20,000 over list. Trucks and sport utility vehicles flew off lots at record prices. For consumers, it felt like betrayal. Families already struggling with inflation in food and housing were told that a new car meant surrendering thousands more than expected. News stories of outrageous markups circulated, from compact sedans doubling in price to popular trucks selling for the cost of a small house in rural America. Buyers remembered the humiliation of being told to take it or leave it. That resentment did not fade when supply chains normalized. It lingered, creating a political climate where regulators felt emboldened to crack down. Lawmakers cited pandemic markups as justification for transparency rules. The memory of gouging hardened consumer suspicion. That anger reshaped buyer behavior, drawing sharp lines between the brands people still trusted and the ones they abandoned. Winners and losers. Some badges still vanish overnight. Others do not move for months. This split defines the current market more than any single regulation. At a Toyota or Honda dealership, new arrivals barely have time to cool. Within hours, vehicles are spoken for, paperwork signed, keys handed over. Trust in reliability, value, and straightforward pricing keeps these brands moving even in an uncertain economy. Shoppers believe they will get what they paid for, and that confidence turns into rapid turnover. Walk into a showroom carrying certain luxury marques, and the contrast is stark. The same sedan sits under the same lights month after month. The same sport utility vehicle waits at the edge of the lot, glistening but untouched. These brands leaned heavily on prestige and styling, yet when budgets tighten, buyers demand more than status. They want assurance that the car will last, that the dealer will not squeeze them with hidden extras, and that resale will not plummet. This divide is about more than inventory management. It is about reputation. Brands that cultivated trust through consistency are weathering the storm. Those that leaned on mystique now confront empty lobbies and full parking lots. Demand is reshaping itself around the scars of the markup era. The imbalance in trust forced dealers into desperate tactics that would change the entire rhythm of selling cars. Fire sale frenzy. Discounts turned from strategy into triage. In normal times, a markdown is a carefully planned incentive to spark demand at the end of a sales quarter. Today, for many dealerships, it is survival. Vehicles languishing for hundreds of days become ticking financial bombs. To defuse them, managers cut prices with abandon. Thousands of dollars disappear from window stickers overnight. Some models are bundled into bulk fleet deals at margins so slim they barely cover floor plan interest payments. Others are sent straight to auction, liquidated just to clear space. For shoppers, this looks like a dream market. 0% financing reappears. Extended terms sweeten the deal. Advertisements trumpet clearance events like fireworks shows. Buyers celebrate bargains they never thought they would see again. But beneath the party is desperation. Salespeople admit they have no choice. The longer a vehicle sits, the more it bleeds. Managers sign off on losses rather than let interest payments pile up for another month. In the short term, consumers rejoice. In the long term, these fire sales signal an industry in distress. Every discount represents a concession that the old business model no longer works. Every slashed sticker price chipped away at the foundation of an industry that once seemed untouchable. Franchise walls crack. The fortress of franchise law is cracking. For nearly a century, state statutes shielded dealerships from direct competition by forcing automakers to sell only through franchised local stores. These laws were originally justified as consumer protection, but in practice, they created territories where dealers enjoyed exclusivity. Transparency rules, both federal and state, began to chip away at that arrangement. When every buyer can see a dealer's true offering price online and compare it instantly to a neighboring town, the advantage of geographic monopoly dissolves. Manufacturers are taking notice. Some have begun experimenting with direct-to-consumer models for electric vehicles and special editions. Others test agency-style arrangements where the automaker controls pricing and the dealer merely delivers the product. The legal wall that once guaranteed local leverage now looks fragile. This erosion is not abstract. It shifts power from dealers back to manufacturers and consumers. If transparency becomes permanent, the justification for strict franchise exclusivity may collapse. Dealers who once thought the law insulated them now find themselves exposed, their century-old fortress breached by rules demanding honesty. As the protective walls fell away, the spotlight turned toward new models of selling that challenged the very existence of dealers. Direct sales playbook. The model everyone laughed at just became the playbook. When Tesla first announced it would bypass dealerships and sell directly to consumers, legacy executives scoffed. They argued the system could not scale, that Americans preferred the dealership haggling dance, and that state franchise laws would stop it in its tracks. Yet while traditional dealers are now suffocating under transparency mandates and collapsing margins, Tesla's direct model looks less like a gamble and more like foresight. By controlling pricing across the entire nation, Tesla avoids the patchwork chaos that grips franchise groups. A single adjustment ripples instantly to every buyer. If demand softens, the price falls within days. If orders surge, the sticker climbs without endless negotiation. Inventory flows accordingly. Vehicles shift to markets where they sell fastest, rather than rotting on asphalt for hundreds of days. Customers experience a seamless process that feels more like ordering a phone than buying a car. Legacy automakers are quietly experimenting with similar agency-style sales. Some test online-only editions that bypass local pricing power. Others set up pop-up stores where the manufacturer controls every detail. Dealers may remain delivery agents, but their control is slipping. The future no longer runs through their lots. Yet the real damage was not just in lost sales. It was in the invisible backbone that held the system together. Supply spine snaps. The backbone snaps in silence. Jobs, lenders, suppliers. When a dealership falters, the pain does not stop at the showroom. Salespeople watch commissions evaporate as cars sit unsold. Service departments handle fewer warranty claims when manufacturers redirect vehicles to healthier markets. Administrative staff face layoffs as owners scramble to cut overhead. A job that once promised steady income now feels like standing on a trapdoor. Lenders also feel the strain. Floorplan loans depend on quick turnover. When inventory lingers, repayment slows, and risk models change. Banks begin tightening credit or raising interest rates. Smaller dealers find financing harder to secure, which deepens the spiral. Suppliers feel the shock next. Local advertising agencies lose accounts when marketing budgets vanish. Parts distributors receive fewer orders as service lanes empty. Even cleaning services and catering companies tied to dealerships lose reliable clients. The supply spine buckles quietly but relentlessly. Every lost sale echoes through payrolls and vendor invoices. The pain compounds, leaving small businesses that depended on dealerships wondering how long they can last. The crisis is no longer contained to a single industry. It spreads like a fracture through communities and balance sheets alike. The louder the economic fracture grew, the more politicians rushed in to claim the fight as their own. Political cage fight. When Main Street bleeds, Capitol Hill accelerates. Empty lots, angry workers, and furious consumers became fuel for a political showdown. Dealer associations stormed Washington with dire warnings. They argued that without relief, thousands of small businesses would vanish, destroying jobs and crushing local economies. Lobbyists pushed lawmakers to weaken transparency mandates and restore dealer leverage. On the other side, consumer advocates brandished stories of pandemic gouging. They claimed the current collapse was proof of a rigged system that had long abused buyers. Transparency, they argued, was not the cause of the collapse, but the necessary correction after years of manipulation. The memory of families paying $20,000 above list prices became their rallying cry. For some investors, the chaos is not a warning sign, but an invitation. Distress creates bargains, and bargains create opportunity. Where communities see closures and layoffs, financiers see undervalued assets waiting to be restructured. It is a ruthless calculus, one where profit outweighs tradition every single time. Unions entered with their own demands, representing sales staff, mechanics, and administrative workers. They pressed for job protections in any reform. Sometimes they sided with dealers to preserve payrolls. Other times they aligned with consumer groups to demand accountability. The alliances shifted weekly, creating strange coalitions of adversaries. State capitals became mini battlefields, with attorneys general flexing enforcement muscle, while legislators faced pressure from both business lobbies and voter outrage. In Washington, the fight turned into a spectacle of competing visions for the future of car retail. While lawmakers traded blows, financiers circled the battlefield with very different intentions. Wall Street moves and private equity smelled smoke and followed it to the title desk. As dealership groups faltered, investors saw distressed assets ripe for takeover. Stock prices of publicly traded dealer chains diverged sharply, with the weakest operators drawing the most attention from buyers. For Wall Street, the chaos looked less like a collapse and more like a clearance sale. Private equity firms flush with capital began acquiring struggling networks at bargain valuations. Their goal was consolidation. By combining dozens of stores under one umbrella, they could slash redundant costs, centralize digital platforms, and negotiate better terms with automakers. In theory, a leaner, more technologically integrated retail chain could weather transparency rules better than mom-and-pop operators. Mergers between mid-size groups accelerated. Customer databases, service departments, and brand relationships became the real prize. Even if new car margins evaporated, the recurring revenue from servicing and financing remained valuable. Investors bet that scale and software could replace the old art of negotiation. When the local dealership disappears, the blow is more than financial. It erases a gathering spot where neighbors swapped stories, sponsored events were organized, and community pride was reinforced. The empty lot becomes a visible scar, a reminder that once reliable institutions can vanish almost overnight, leaving silence behind. But the gamble carried risk. If consumer demand kept cooling and automakers seized more pricing power, even consolidated giants could stumble. Wall Street may streamline the industry, but it cannot erase the structural shifts that transparency unleashed. Their takeover attempts set the stage for consequences that would be felt far beyond Wall Street's boardrooms. Hollowed out Main Street. 100 jobs gone is not a headline. It is a hollowed-out weekend economy. In many small towns across America, the local dealership is more than a place to buy cars. It is one of the largest employers, a sponsor of youth baseball teams, a contributor to parades, and a donor to community projects. When that dealership shutters, the loss ripples through every corner of civic life. A Friday night game without the dealership's banner looks empty. A county fair without their sponsorship feels quieter. The economic math is equally painful. A dealership employing 100 people often sustains another 100 or 200 jobs indirectly, from janitorial services to catering businesses. Losing that anchor means local tax bases shrink, forcing schools and town councils to cut programs. Entire regions already struggling with population decline feel the blow sharply. For many, the dealership is the last major private sector employer left standing. When the local dealership disappears, the blow is more than financial. It erases a gathering spot where neighbors swapped stories, sponsored events were organized, and community pride was reinforced. The empty lot becomes a visible scar, a reminder that once reliable institutions can vanish almost overnight, leaving silence behind. Families who once saw dealership jobs as stable careers now confront uncertainty. Mechanics with decades of training face the prospect of relocation or retraining. Salespeople lose commissions that once paid mortgages. The collapse is not just corporate restructuring, it is a community hollowing out. The disappearance of local anchors left buyers confronting deals that looked like windfalls but carried hidden costs. The buyer's gamble. Today's bargain can be tomorrow's orphan. For consumers, the collapse of traditional dealerships creates a paradox. On one hand, the desperation of dealers translates into extraordinary discounts. Shoppers who time their visits well can drive away with vehicles thousands of dollars below manufacturer-suggested prices. Financing deals stretch for unprecedented terms, and trade-in allowances are juiced to clear lots. At first glance, it feels like a golden age for car buyers. Yet every deal carries hidden risks. As dealerships close or consolidate, service centers become scarce. A buyer might save $5,000 on a new vehicle only to drive 100 miles for warranty work. The resale market also destabilizes. When an oversupply of discounted cars floods the market, used values tumble, leaving buyers underwater on loans. A car bought at a discount today may be worth far less than expected when it is time to trade or sell. Some buyers admit the thrill of winning a deal fades quickly once the realities set in. A bargain car without convenient service feels less like a victory and more like a burden. What begins as triumph at the lot can transform into frustration every time the engine light blinks. Consumers must navigate with new caution. They must weigh brand stability, dealership survival, and the risk of service deserts. Bargain hunting becomes a gamble where the short-term thrill of saving money could lead to long-term frustration. Those uneasy trade-offs mirrored a much larger transformation sweeping through every sector of the economy. Transparency everywhere. America's transparency tide is bigger than cars. What is happening in the dealership industry mirrors transformations in housing, retail, and healthcare. In real estate, buyers now browse digital platforms where fees and commissions are disclosed up front. In retail, major brands bypass department stores and sell directly to shoppers online. In healthcare, digital platforms connect patients directly to providers, cutting out layers of opaque middlemen. The same consumer hunger for clarity that toppled dealership secrecy is rewriting expectations everywhere. For decades, dealers thrived because they controlled information. They decided when the real price appeared, what financing terms were offered, and which extras slid into contracts. Now technology and regulation make that control impossible. Buyers armed with smartphones expect instant comparisons, plain numbers, and fair choices. Industries that resist look outdated or even deceitful. Shoppers no longer accept mystery as part of the process. They compare prices on phones while standing inside showrooms, and they broadcast unfair practices across social media instantly. Every hidden fee becomes a scandal, every delay a headline. Transparency is no longer optional. It is demanded, enforced, and weaponized. This cultural reset redefines trust. Opacity is no longer tolerated as clever business practice. It is condemned as manipulation. The dealership collapse may be the most visible casualty, but the lesson reaches further. Every industry reliant on gatekeepers must adapt or risk similar implosion. That wave of openness carried the auto industry toward its ultimate destination, a world ruled by screens and software. You've seen how far this collapse already reaches, and the story is only getting bigger. To make sure you don't miss the next wave, subscribe right now and hit the bell. That way, you'll be the first to know when the next revelation breaks. The digital showroom future. When code sets the price, the showroom becomes a screen. Automakers increasingly push toward platforms where buying a vehicle feels no different from ordering a laptop. A customer configures a model online, selects financing with a click, and schedules delivery at a local hub. Dealers become logistics nodes, not negotiators. Original equipment manufacturers seize the chance to control data directly. By running pricing algorithms, they can adjust instantly to demand, test subscription models for features, and roll out nationwide promotions without dealer interference. Digital signatures replace handshake deals, and the old art of haggling fades. Some manufacturers even explore monthly subscription tiers, where access to upgraded software or battery capacity depends on payments, extending revenue long after the initial sale. This shift raises a new question. Who owns the customer? If manufacturers dominate digital sales, dealerships lose direct relationships that once bound communities together. Control over data, financing, and ongoing subscriptions becomes the true battlefield. The collapse of traditional dealerships does not mark the end of auto retail. It marks the beginning of an entirely new contest fought on screens rather than showrooms. And that contest will decide whether the American car buyer remains empowered or once again becomes a captive in a reinvented system. You've just seen how the collapse of dealerships is rewriting everything we thought was stable. But this story doesn't end here. The next chapters are already unfolding. If you want to stay ahead of it, subscribe right now, hit the bell, and join the conversation in the comments. Your perspective matters, and your awareness is power. Don't scroll past and forget this, because while others wake up too late, you'll already know what's coming and how to protect yourself.